Studies reveal that 70% of families harbor secrets that, when exposed, shatter trust in ways that linger for generations. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, where whispers carried more weight than truth, one such secret festered within the Hartley family. On a stormy November night, the facade of their perfect life crumbled, revealing a betrayal so profound, it tore at the roots of their bond. The revelation wasn't just a moment, it was a reckoning, exposing lies that had been carefully woven into the fabric of their lives. What began as a routine family dinner spiraled into a night where truths, long buried, clawed their way to the surface, leaving no one unscathed. Family secrets are like shadows cast by a flickering candle. They grow larger in the dark, distorting reality until the light exposes their true shape. In every household, there are truths left unspoken, whether to protect loved ones or to preserve a fragile harmony. Yet these secrets often become the fault lines upon which trust fractures. Betrayal, especially within a family, cuts deeper than any external wound, for it undermines the foundation of safety and love. In Willow Creek, the Hartley family seemed to embody the ideal. Thomas, a stoic father, Margaret, his nurturing wife, and their two children, Daniel and Sarah, who carried the weight of their parents' unspoken expectations. But beneath their polished exterior, a secret simmered, one that would unravel their carefully constructed lives. The resonance of family secrets lies in their universality. Who hasn't felt the sting of a hidden truth, whether it's a parent's concealed past or a sibling's buried resentment? These stories captivate because they mirror our own fears of vulnerability and exposure. For the Hartleys, the secret was not just a single lie, but a tapestry of half-truths, each thread pulled taut over decades. Thomas, the narrator of this tale, carried the burden of knowing more than he let on, his silence a shield and a curse. As a third-person observer to his own life, he watched his family's harmony erode, knowing the storm was inevitable. The night of the unraveling wasn't just about one betrayal. It was about the collision of every choice made to protect or destroy the ones they loved. This story unfolds through Thomas's eyes, a man whose stoic exterior hid a heart bruised by years of loyalty and doubt. His perspective offers a window into the emotional toll of secrets, not just on the betrayer, but on those who sense the truth, yet choose silence. The Hartley's tale is one of love warped by deception, of trust stretched until it snapped. As we delve into their world, we'll explore how a single night reshaped their understanding of family, exposing the fragility of bonds built on half-truths. What makes this narrative gripping is its raw honesty, how it lays bare the pain of betrayal while hinting at the possibility of redemption, or at least understanding, in the aftermath. The Hartley's story is a mirror, reflecting our own struggles with truth and the courage it takes to face it. The Hartley family's home stood at the edge of Willow Creek, a two-story relic of better days, its white paint peeling like secrets shedding their disguise. Inside, the air was thick with unspoken tensions, the kind that settle into the bones of a family over years. Thomas Hartley, a man of 52, sat at the head of the dinner table, his calloused hands folded as if in prayer, though he'd long abandoned faith in anything but routine. His wife Margaret moved with practiced grace, setting plates of roast and potatoes, her smile a mask that never quite reached her eyes. Their children, Daniel, 25, and Sarah, 22, filled the room with chatter, but their words danced around the edges of something heavier. The central issue wasn't new. It had roots in decades past, when Thomas and Margaret were young, their love a fragile thing tested by choices neither spoke of now. The secret began with Margaret's brother, Edward, a man whose name was rarely uttered in the Hartley home. Edward had been a drifter, charming but reckless, and his shadow loomed over the family like a storm cloud. Years ago, he'd vanished after a falling out with Thomas, leaving behind a debt, both financial and emotional, that the Hartleys had never fully repaid. The secret wasn't just Edward's disappearance. What Thomas had done to protect his family from Edward's chaos, a decision that cost more than he'd ever admitted. Thomas had always been the pillar, the one who fixed problems with quiet resolve. When Edward's gambling debts brought dangerous men to their doorstep, Thomas paid them off, draining their savings and taking a second mortgage on the house. But the real cost was the lie he told Margaret, that the money went to a failed business venture. She believed him, or chose to, and the lie became a wall between them. Over time it grew, fed by Thomas's guilt and Margaret's suspicion. The children sensed it too. Daniel's guarded questions about their uncle, Sarah's uneasy glances when money was tight. The secret was a living thing, shaping their interactions, turning love into obligation. The impact on their relationships was subtle at first. Margaret's warmth cooled, her affection tinged with distance. Thomas buried himself in work, avoiding the questions in her eyes. Daniel, ambitious and restless, began to resent his father's stoicism, seeing it as weakness. Sarah, the peacemaker, tried to bridge the gaps, but her efforts only highlighted the fractures. Trust, once the bedrock of their family, became a fragile thing, eroded by the weight of what wasn't said. The secret wasn't just about Edward. It was about the choices each Hartley made to protect themselves, and how those choices betrayed the ones they loved. As the years passed, the lie grew heavier. Thomas justified it as protection, but it was a betrayal of Margaret's trust, a theft of her right to know. Margaret, sensing the deception, withdrew into herself, her silence a mirror to Thomas's. The children, caught in the crossfire, learned to navigate a home where truth was a guest rarely invited. The problem wasn't just the secret. It was the way it warped their bonds, turning love into a transaction, trust into a gamble. The dinner that November night was meant to be ordinary, a ritual to maintain the illusion of unity. But the air was charged, the storm outside mirroring the one brewing within. Daniel arrived late, his jaw tight, a letter clutched in his hand. Sarah's eyes darted between her parents, sensing the shift. Margaret's smile faltered as she served the meal, and Thomas's hands trembled slightly as he poured the wine. The secret, long buried, was about to surface, and with it, the truth of their betrayed trust. The lie had begun 20 years ago, when Edward's debts led to a confrontation that changed everything. Thomas had found Edward in a bar, drunk and desperate, begging for help. The men demanding payment were not patient, and Thomas, fearing for his young family, made a choice. He paid the debt, but in doing so, he demanded Edward leave and never return. Edward agreed, but not before revealing a truth that cut deeper than any debt. He'd been in love with Margaret, and she'd known, even reciprocated, before choosing Thomas. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal, a wound Thomas carried in silence. That night, as the storm raged, the family sat in a fragile tableau, unaware that Daniel had found Edward. The letter in his hand was from his uncle, now living in a distant city, claiming he'd been exiled by Thomas's jealousy. Daniel had been digging, piecing together fragments of their past, and the letter was the spark that would ignite the truth. The challenge wasn't just the secret's exposure, it was what it would do to the Hartleys' already fraying bonds. Trust, once broken, is not easily rebuilt, and the fallout would test whether their love could survive the truth. The dinner table became a stage, each Hartley playing their role. Thomas, the stoic protector, hid his fear behind a calm facade. Margaret, the nurturer, masked her unease with hospitality. Daniel, the truth seeker, burned with questions he'd long suppressed. Sarah, the mediator, tried to keep the peace, unaware of the storm about to break. The secret had shaped their lives, dictating their choices, their silences, their resentments. Its unraveling would force them to confront not just the lie, but the parts of themselves they'd hidden to maintain it. The challenge was clear. Could they face the truth without losing each other, or would the betrayal tear them apart forever? The Hartley family's story was not unique in Willow Creek, where secrets were as common as the oak trees lining Main Street. But their tale carried a particular weight, a slow-burning tragedy that unfolded over decades. To understand the emotional and relational consequences of their secret, one must look beyond the lie itself to the lives it shaped. Thomas, Margaret, Daniel, and Sarah were not just victims of a betrayal, they were architects of their own pain, each complicit in the silence that let the lie fester. Thomas's decision to banish Edward was born of love, or so he told himself. At 32, with a young family and a modest income, he saw no other way to protect them. Edward's charm had always been a threat, a reminder of what Thomas lacked: charisma, ease, the ability to make Margaret laugh. When Edward confessed his feelings for Margaret, it wasn't just a betrayal of trust, it was a confirmation of Thomas's deepest fears. He paid the debt, sent Edward away, and lied to Margaret, believing the truth would destroy her love for him. But the lie became a prison, locking him in a cycle of guilt and distance. He watched Margaret's warmth fade, her laughter replaced by a quiet resignation, and he blamed himself, though he could never say it. Margaret, for her part, wasn't blameless. She'd known of Edward's feelings, had even felt a flicker of something in return before choosing Thomas, but she never told him, fearing it would wound his pride. When Thomas claimed the money was lost to a bad investment, she sensed the lie but didn't press. Her silence was her own betrayal, a choice to preserve peace over truth. Over time, that choice hardened her, turning her love for Thomas into a duty. She poured her energy into the children, but even that was tainted by the secret. Daniel's ambition, Sarah's empathy. They were shaped by a home where truth was a luxury they couldn't afford. Daniel's discovery of Edward was no accident. He'd always been curious, a boy who asked too many questions about the uncle whose name was taboo. At 25, working as a journalist, he had the tools to dig. A chance encounter with a former friend of Edward's led him to the letter, a rambling confession that painted Thomas as the villain. Daniel felt betrayed, not just by his father's lie but by the family's silence. He'd grown up idolizing Thomas, only to learn his hero was flawed, human, capable of cruelty. The letter burned in his pocket as he drove to the family dinner, his anger a live wire ready to spark. Sarah, the youngest, was the family's heart, but even she carried scars. She'd sensed the tension between her parents, the way their conversations skirted certain topics. She'd tried to bridge it with kindness, organizing family dinners, keeping the peace. But her efforts were like bandaging a wound that needed surgery. The secret made her question her own instincts. How could she trust her family when they hid so much? Her role as peacemaker was both her strength and her burden, leaving her vulnerable to the fallout when the truth emerged. The emotional consequences of the secret were profound. For Thomas, it was guilt, a constant weight that made him withdraw from those he loved. For Margaret, it was resentment, a slow poison that eroded her trust in Thomas. Daniel's discovery fueled his anger, a sense of betrayal that made him question his place in the family. Sarah's empathy became her cage, trapping her in a role she couldn't escape. The secret didn't just divide them, it reshaped their identities, forcing each to confront the parts of themselves they'd buried. Relationally, the secret was a wedge. Thomas and Margaret's marriage, once passionate, became a partnership of convenience. They loved each other, but it was a love strained by what they wouldn't say. Daniel's relationship with his father soured as he grew older, his questions met with deflections. Sarah's closeness with her mother was tempered by the secrets she sensed but couldn't name. The family functioned, but it was a fragile machine, creaking under the weight of unspoken truths. Other families in Willow Creek faced similar struggles. The Millers, down the road, hid a patriarch's alcoholism, their silence enabling his decline. The Thompsons buried a scandal involving an affair, the truth leaking out in hushed arguments. These stories, shared in whispers at church or over coffee, showed how secrets breed isolation. When trust is betrayed, it's not just the lie that hurts. It's the realization that those closest to you chose to hide the truth. For the Hartleys, the secret about Edward was a microcosm of this larger truth, a single lie that rippled through their lives, altering their connections. As the dinner approached, the family's dynamics were a powder keg. Thomas sensed Daniel's agitation but didn't know its source. Margaret noticed the letter in Daniel's hand but said nothing, her instinct to avoid conflict overriding her curiosity. Sarah tried to lighten the mood, her laughter forced, her eyes pleading for normalcy. The storm outside grew louder, rain battering the windows, as if nature itself demanded the truth. The secret had shaped their lives for 20 years, but its exposure would test whether their love could endure the wreckage. The storm outside the Hartley home roared, a fitting prelude to the chaos about to unfold. The dining room, lit by a chandelier that flickered with every gust, held the family in a tense tableau. Thomas carved the roast with deliberate care, his eyes avoiding Daniel's. Margaret passed the potatoes, her movements mechanical, while Sarah tried to fill the silence with talk of her new job. Daniel, clutching the letter, barely touched his food, his jaw tight with the weight of what he knew. The moment had come, not by choice, but by inevitability, when the secret that had defined their family would no longer stay buried. It began with a question, sharp and sudden, cutting through Sarah's chatter. "Dad," Daniel said, his voice low but steady, "why did you make Uncle Edward leave?" The room stilled, the clink of cutlery silenced. Thomas froze, the carving knife hovering above the roast. Margaret's hand trembled as she set down the serving dish, her eyes darting to Thomas. Sarah's smile faltered, her gaze shifting between her brother and father. The question wasn't just a query, it was an accusation, laced with years of unanswered doubts. Thomas's mind raced, the memory of that night 20 years ago flooding back. Edward's slurred confession, the men at their door, the money he'd paid to keep them safe. He'd told himself it was for the family, but the truth was messier. Edward's love for Margaret had been a knife in his heart, and banishing him was as much about pride as protection. Now, facing Daniel's stare, Thomas felt the weight of his choice. "What are you talking about?" he said, his voice rough, buying time. Daniel slid the letter across the table, its edges worn from being read and reread. "This," he said, "from Uncle Edward. He says you forced him out because you were jealous, because he loved Mom." The words landed like a thunderclap. Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Sarah's eyes widened, her fork clattering to her plate. Thomas stared at the letter, the past rushing forward to meet the present. "Daniel," Margaret whispered, her voice breaking, "where did you get that?" But Daniel's eyes were on Thomas, demanding answers. "Is it true?" he pressed. "Did you lie to us? Did you lie to Mom about the money, about everything?" The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as the secret unraveled. Thomas's silence was answer enough, and Daniel's anger flared. "You let us think he abandoned us, but you pushed him away. You broke this family." Margaret's face crumpled, her composure shattered. "Thomas," she said, her voice a mix of hurt and disbelief, "what did you do?" The question wasn't just about Edward, it was about the years of distance, the lie that had grown between them. Thomas opened his mouth, but no words came. The truth, so long avoided, was now a beast in the room, demanding to be faced. Sarah, ever the peacemaker, tried to intervene. "Danny, maybe there's more to it. Let Dad explain." But her voice trembled, her faith in her father shaken. Daniel shook his head, his voice rising. "Explain what? That he lied to protect his ego? That he let us grow up thinking we weren't enough for Uncle Edward to stay?" The betrayal wasn't just Thomas's. It was the family's collective silence, the way they'd all played along to avoid the truth. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I knew," she said, the admission cutting through the tension. "I knew Edward loved me. I didn't tell you, Thomas, because I chose you, but you never trusted me enough to tell me the truth." Her words were a second blow, revealing her own complicity. Thomas's face paled, the weight of her confession sinking in. The lie wasn't just his, it was theirs. A shared betrayal that had eroded their marriage. The immediate fallout was chaos. Daniel stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "You both lied," he said, his voice thick with hurt. "You let us think we were a family, but it was all a sham." He stormed out, the front door slamming behind him, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Sarah sat frozen, tears streaming down her face, her role as the family's glue dissolving. Margaret reached for Thomas's hand, but he pulled away, his guilt a barrier too thick to breach. Thomas stood, his voice hoarse. "I did it for us," he said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. He followed Daniel into the storm, desperate to explain, but the rain swallowed his voice. Margaret and Sarah remained at the table, the remnants of dinner a mockery of the unity they'd tried to maintain. The revelation wasn't just about Edward. It was about the trust they'd all betrayed, the love they'd taken for granted. The night stretched on, each Hartley grappling with the fallout. Daniel drove aimlessly, the letter crumpled in his pocket, his anger giving way to grief. Sarah cleaned the kitchen in silence, her tears falling onto the dishes, her world upended. Margaret sat alone, staring at a photo of her and Thomas from happier days, wondering if they could ever rebuild what was lost. Thomas stood in the rain, the weight of his choices drowning him, knowing he'd hurt the ones he'd sworn to protect. The climax wasn't just the revelation. It was the moment each Hartley saw the truth of their family, stripped of pretense. The secret had been a poison, but its exposure was a wound that might heal, or might fester. The immediate reactions, Daniel's anger, Sarah's tears, Margaret's confession, Thomas's silence, were the raw edges of their pain, but they were also the first steps toward facing the truth. The night the Hartley family's secret unraveled left them scattered, each grappling with the truth in their own way. The revelation of Thomas's lie about Edward, compounded by Margaret's admission and Daniel's confrontation, exposed the fragility of their trust. But it also offered a chance to rebuild, if they could find the courage to face the wreckage. The main insight was clear. Secrets, even those kept out of love, erode the bonds they're meant to protect. The Hartley story was a testament to the cost of silence and the power of truth, however painful. Thomas's lie had been a shield, but it had also been a blade, cutting into his marriage and his children's faith in him. The emotional toll was evident in the days that followed. Daniel stayed away, his anger a wall he wasn't ready to dismantle. Sarah withdrew, her role as peacemaker shattered by the realization that her family's harmony was a facade. Margaret and Thomas lived in the same house, but as strangers, their conversations stilted, their touches tentative. The secret had not just broken trust, it had forced them to question who they were to each other. Yet the unraveling also revealed resilience. Margaret began writing letters to Edward, not to reconnect, but to understand her own choices. Her honesty, though belated, was a step toward reclaiming her voice. Sarah started therapy, learning to set boundaries rather than always smoothing over conflict. Daniel, though still angry, reached out to Thomas after a week, agreeing to meet and talk. Thomas, haunted by his silence, began to open up, sharing pieces of his fear and guilt with Margaret. The process was slow, painful, but it was a start. The broader implication was that trust, once broken, requires more than apologies. It demands accountability. The Hartleys had to learn to see each other anew, not as roles, father, mother, son, daughter, but as flawed humans capable of both betrayal and forgiveness. Their story echoed others in Willow Creek, where families face their own reckonings. The Millers, for instance, finally confronted their patriarch's alcoholism, finding strength in honesty. The Thompsons rebuilt after their scandal by choosing transparency over shame. These stories showed that betrayal, while devastating, could be a catalyst for growth. The Hartleys' journey wasn't over. Trust wasn't rebuilt in a night or even a year. But the truth, once exposed, gave them a foundation to start from. They learned that love isn't enough. It must be paired with honesty, vulnerability, and the willingness to face pain together. The night their lies unraveled was a wound, but it was also a door, one they could choose to walk through or turn away from. The Hartley story is a mirror to our own. Secrets and betrayals shape us all. Have you faced a family truth that changed everything? Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Your story might resonate with someone else. If this tale of trust and redemption moved you, check out our other videos on family dynamics and relationships. From stories of forgiveness to explorations of love's complexities, there's more to discover about the ties that bind us. Hit the like button if this story spoke to you, and subscribe to join our community as we unravel more human truths. Your voice matters. Let's keep the conversation going. The Hartley family's tale leaves us wondering, can love survive the truth? Their story, raw and unflinching, pulls us into the heart of betrayal, where trust is both fragile and resilient. The night their lies unraveled wasn't just a breaking point. It was a beginning, a chance to rebuild or lose everything. As Thomas, Margaret, Daniel, and Sarah navigate the aftermath, we're left questioning our own secrets, our own silences. What truths do we hide to protect those we love, and at what cost? The Hartleys' journey, though painful, is a reminder that facing the truth, however shattering, is the only way to mend what's broken. Their story lingers, a haunting echo of the choices we all face in the shadows of our families.